For all races with more than 2 candidates, you should consider not just your first choice, but your second and third choices as well. 4 candidates have filed for the Ward 13 council seat, and they have all agreed and are here to participate tonight. In alphabetical order, they are Bob Carney Jr., Zach Metzger, Kate Mortensen, and Linneo Palmisano. The candidates have drawn numbers and will be seated in that order from 1 on the far end of the table from me to number 4 down here. They will begin by responding to questions in that order, and we will rotate with each succeeding questions. We have timekeepers in the front so that each candidate has the same amount of time to respond to each question. Following the opening statements, each candidate will have up to 1.5 minutes to answer each question, and at the end, only 1 minute to make a closing statement. The timekeeper will hold up a card when there are 15 seconds left. Show them the card, please. And a stop card when time is up. We ask that the candidates finish their sentence and stop, please. Questions from community members were allowed to be submitted in advance. During the forum, we will take written questions from the audience, and a volunteer will gather those questions and hand them to our question facilitators and then to the moderator. We ask that questions be clear and pertinent to the issues at hand and made in the form of a question, not a statement. Questions must be directed to all of the candidates. Questions that are hostile or of a personal nature will not be asked. We may consolidate questions of the same general topic. Finally, all questions submitted become the property of LWV Minneapolis. We will be asking questions about policing and public safety, housing, neighborhood support and welfare, climate and environmental equity and action plans, city government, and some general questions. In order to get to as many topics as possible, we will limit the number of questions in each category. There is never enough time, and looking at the questions in front of me, there is not enough time to possibly ask all of the questions. If you feel your question was not addressed, please contact the candidates directly after the forum. It is now time for opening statements. I'm going to ask the candidates to make a statement and also make sure that you address the question of why you're running for Ward 13 City Council seat, what are your qualifications, including past public service. And we will begin with Ms. Palmisano.
My name is Linneo Palmisano, and I'm your elected City Council member. I'm running for re-election as the DFL-endorsed candidate, the labor-endorsed candidate, including first responders like the firefighters, the building trades that are helping to rebuild our city, and of special importance to me, Women Winning. That's a coalition. 10 years ago, Women Winning came and asked me to run for this open seat. Public service was honestly not in my plan, but as I reflected on it, it was exactly where I belonged. After 15 years in the private sector, I wanted a vocation more similar to how I spent all my free time, which was community building, working on social justice, coaching in our public schools, all for the greater good. I keep that in mind as I represent every resident in this ward and also represent the needs of every resident in our city. That is a balancing act and is a tremendous responsibility that I approach with all my energy. There's no doubt about it, this is a hard job. You don't come in and automatically get things done. I have worked hard to build coalitions and get us through difficulties. I'm selected by my peers to be the council vice president and work in close partnership with Council President Jenkins and Mayor Fry. So I'm part of a leadership team, one that comes with different opinions, but truly seeks to govern together. Our city deserves that. My work here is not done. We're still in a challenging environment. I have 10 years of experience, and experience matters. Relationships matter, and hard work matters. I've taken some lonely votes on council because I've stood up for you. I don't do this job to stand in the spotlight or make flashy statements. I'm running for re-election and ask for your vote. I'm not running to be someone. It's never been about me. I want to continue doing this work for you.
Ms. Mortensen?
Hello, everybody. I'm Kate. I'm a 17-year neighbor in Lyndhurst neighborhood with my family. And I'm a civic leader, a business owner, and a proud third-generation member of a family business, Mortensen Construction. In conversation with you all over these last 6 months, on your doorstep, at Meet Kate events, at National Night Out, over hundreds of conversations, I have been posing a fundamental question. Is this the best we can do? And I've learned a few things. One is that we have a case of low expectations brought on by a disappointing status quo. The only people who can change that are the people in this room, the people who are watching from home, the voters of Ward 13. We need to use our votes and speak together and say to the city of Minneapolis, from a practical progressive ward, we expect more. Hard work, that's nice. We need results. Saying no to bad policy, that's a low bar. And frankly, we should be able to work across differences to get the city's business accomplished. I've learned also that the things that we want in Ward 13 are the things that everybody wants. They're not only possible, they are necessary. Number one, safety. And I mean personal safety. I will never give up on our expectation to be safe in our homes and on our streets. Number two, we need our city services to serve us. And by that, I mean roads clear of potholes, garbage, and snow. And number three, we need to set the table for success in Downtown 2.0, a resurgence in Uptown, and the success of our local businesses in Ward 13. Don't tell me it's not possible. With our assets, our people, and potential, we can expect more.
Thank you. Mr. Kearney?
Hi, I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters in Mount Olivet. I'm Bob, again, Kearney Jr., again in quote marks. I'm a frequent filer. Some people call that a perennial candidate. I like to spin it a little differently. I'm also the only Republican on the ballot, and that's a big reason why I'm running. I first ran for elective office for mayor in 2009, and I am trying to move the Republican Party in a more moderate and, don't tell anybody, liberal direction. And by liberal, I mean in the sense of John Rawls' theory of justice, that we need to focus on the process, we need to listen to everybody, make sure everybody is participating. That is what it means to be Republican. I'll be having a little costume, Super Rhino Man. Unfortunately, some of us have been reduced to Republican in name only. It's all that's left in a lot of ways. This is very unfortunate. So I want to be a voice for Republicans in Minneapolis. Now, I have a kind of an unusual deal here. My only promise is that if I'm elected, I will not take the oath of office. Here's why. Somebody continues to serve, Lene would continue to serve, until a successor qualifies. If I don't take the oath, I don't qualify. And so this is like ranked choice voting on steroids. You get to have both a Republican voice elected in Minneapolis, something we desperately need, and you also get to have on a de facto basis Lene serving as your continuing city council member. So how's that for a deal? I'm asking for your first choice vote, and I will work with everybody to make this a better city. Thank you.
Mr. Metzger?
Firstly, I don't know how to follow up after that. That was brilliant. My name is Zachary James Metzger. Nice to meet you guys. Thank you all for attending, YouTube as well, and thank you, League of Women Voters, for doing tremendous work. I'm a fourth-generation resident of Ward 13, Southwest Minneapolis, and I am here running to be the change that so many of us, especially over the last 3 years, have asked for, and really to help Ward 13. I recognize a lot of you because I personally have knocked on literally every single door in Ward 13 while dropping flyers, and a lot of you have told me that you feel unheard, and I know what it feels like to not be listened to. we have running one of the biggest developers in the state, as well as somebody who often sides with developers. You know, those large houses on your block that oftentimes you don't like. I'm here to provide new leadership. I am the first BIPOC candidate running for Ward 13 in Minneapolis City Council. That is extremely valuable, and that is something that so many people have asked for and wanted for, and this is what equity looks like in action. I'm not here for money. It's not a job. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not a businessman. I am a people person. You asked why, and I feel as though the city has just been so negligent. And as a lot of you have told me, things that you want fall upon deaf ears, and leadership is not acting in the direction of the people that is obvious and clear, no matter which side of an issue you sit on. That is objective. Again, thank you, League of Women Voters, and thank you guys for all being out here. I appreciate you.
Thank you. We will now move to questions. Again, candidates will have up to 1.5 minutes to answer each question. We will do the first question in the same order as opening statements, and then we will begin to rotate so that every candidate gets to be the first to answer a question at some point. So we will begin with Ms. Palmisano. In policing and public safety, the City Council approved the court-enforceable Minneapolis Police Department consent decree with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. What specifically should the City Council do to support the implementation and the compliance of the agreement terms? Ms. Palmisano.
Thank you. I want to point out that we have a settlement agreement with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights, and we are in the process of working on a consent decree with the Department of Justice. It is of foremost importance that we are not going in two different directions here. We need to have one monitor that's an appointed monitor that the city helps to pay for. And that monitor, that selection of somebody who's a third-party objective person that responds to the courts and says that the city is making the progress that we say that we're making, is of paramount importance. It is important that we select the right monitor, and it is important that we have one instead of two, with both a settlement agreement and a consent decree. Secondly, I think it's of critical importance for us to be willing as a council to put the resources necessary, and it's going to be expensive. We've been planning for it even in this year's budget cycle, and been ramping up that infrastructure, that quality control, that internal, the analysts, the people who you will never see, but are going to be critically important in managing the performance and getting to a place that we are all very proud of. Going forward with our police department. So the second part is funding the necessary infrastructure to make this a success. The third would be making it very knowable to the public. I'm out of time.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen.
Slow walking change is what got us into this position in the first place. I would, number one, lean in fully to the behavioral crisis response option. That came from the Office of Performance and Innovation of the city, a beleaguered department that has been trying for years to bring forward better solutions for public safety for folks. We will lean into that. That is what the Department of Justice has asked us to do. It's one of their recommendations to our city. Number two, I've recently been spending time with sworn officers. It's a really tough job, especially right now. If you see the equipment and where they work, it's not a great environment. And some of them really struggle to understand what is their job in these times. So it is not a conflict for me to be leaning into the behavioral crisis response fully, and also fully supporting our sworn officers to do their best possible work. And that may mean an increase in pay. It may mean other wellness initiatives, because we absolutely need more cops in neighborhoods like Ward 13, where we continue to struggle with rising crime.
Thank you. Mr. Carney?
Well, first of all, we have to ask Lene, based on what I said, planning not to take the oath. But I do want to talk about policing and public safety. I was on the East Harriet Neighborhood Association board when Lene came to speak with us at a time when the chief was talking about 400 more officers. And I asked her about that. Well, from then until now, we're down a total of about 700 when you take the 400 that didn't happen and the 300 that were down. And this is a very serious problem. At the same time, we need to be rethinking how we do public safety, and I think that we need to use technology on that. It is possible, cars are deadly weapons. It is possible when someone is being pulled over to have technology that's going to be blocking those tires to prevent someone from driving off. That's the first step. We need to figure out how to be able to safely detain people. We also need to send out a message, almost like warning labels. We have warning labels for dangerous products. The fact is, policing is a dangerous service. And we need everybody to understand, including through education in our schools, that when police tell you to do something, you have to do it. We need to fundamentally support our police, but we also need to have technology to make our entire operation safer.
Thank you. Mr. Metzger?
Can you please repeat the question?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
The City Council approved the court-enforceable Minneapolis Police Department consent decree with the Minnesota Department of Human Rights. What specifically should the City Council do to support the implementation and compliance of the agreement terms?
Thank you, Lonnie. So firstly, City Council does budget. We do legislation, policy. I'm saying we as though I'm already a City Council member. And when it comes to this consent decree, we would have to work with a monitor. Now, Mayor Fry said the exact same thing Lene just said, which was that one monitor is enough. But immediately after he said one monitor is enough, the United States Department of Justice said, quote, the DOJ, the consent decree is outside the scope of the MDHR, and we will need 2 monitors. That was not Minnesota. That was not our mayor. That was the United States Department of Justice. Mind you, there are 2 consent decrees. We are currently negotiating one with the United States Department of Justice and the other one with the MDHR. So we have to work with both monitors, one of which is appointed by the DOJ, to create a greater Minneapolis Police Department so that we don't have more Derek Chauvins. I don't know if you guys looked into the consent decree and saw the data, but working with a monitor would ensure that we do not have a 2020. Also, it looks like being transparent. It looks like making sure that every decision that happens, the city knows about, Ward 13 residents know about, everyone is on board with, and keeping everyone updated on the process. 2 monitors.
Thank you. We will move on to a housing question, and we will begin with Ms. Mortensen. What is your position on regulating rent, and how do you think the City Council should proceed to address this?
I'm opposed to regulating rent because it is not effective policy. I have a ton of empathy for people who are challenged every month to meet the greatest expense, which is usually rent. However, a Pew Charitable Trust study has shown that without rent control, we have been able in the last number of years to increase housing stock by 8%, while rent has only gone up by 1%. So we are absolutely on the right track without rent control. And at the same time, I think it's important to recognize that in this situation, while rent is not the villain, the cost of everything is a huge challenge for people. And we need interventions, be they vouchers or credits or direct assistance, to help especially our most vulnerable people with this issue.
Mr. Carney?
first of all, of course, ask Lene. But beyond that, one of the things that was looked at in the about 100 years ago was something called Road Town. It was a plan to have cities essentially built along road right-of-ways. And this has been talked about more recently. It really pays to go back and look in our history as to some ideas that have really been around for a long time. We need to think about why it is so expensive for people to live in Minneapolis. And we need to make it more possible for people to both live on road right-of-ways throughout the Twin Cities in affordable housing that is constructed along the road town idea, and for them to be able to commute to the core cities using bus transportation. So that is one idea that I'd be advocating for. It is much less expensive to build affordable housing on road right-of-ways that are ex-urban. We really need to ask why we have a situation where we're concentrating our low-income people in areas where it is so expensive to live.
Thank you. Mr. Metzger.
That might be his last statement might be the first time I agreed with a Republican in modern times. Lonnie, one more time, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question?
What is your position on regulating rent, and how do you think the city council should proceed to address this issue?
Thank you. So I know that rent control is not a solution. It actually only helps the next generation of people that live in the unit. That being said, affordable housing in general is so much bigger than a one policy issue. It's a systemic thing, and Minneapolis over the last 10 years has continually tried to solve massive problems with one thing at a time. You look at homelessness and they're like, let's affordable housing, that's it. Rent control, no. This is a systemic issue that is not being addressed in a holistic manner. And when we say rent control is the answer, rent control is never the answer anywhere. It never has been. It only helps one person. And that person typically is not the person after, because this type of rent control that we're looking at is for the tenant, not even the unit. And there's a lot of landlords in here that are completely opposed to rent control for the unit. Rent control can stop the growth of a city, and rent control, you know, when we're in the middle of a housing crisis, a homelessness crisis, we have to understand data, though. A $100 increase, a $100 increase in rent increases homelessness by 9%. So when you look at these numbers, we have to see that holistic and systemic issues like this, there's not just one way to go about it.
Thank you, Mr. Metzger. Ms. Palmisano.
Thank you. We are unanimous up here in ideology on this topic. I also do not support a strict 3% rent cap or any other restrictive policies on rent control. All we need to do is look across the river to our neighbors in St. Paul to see the effects on an overly strict policy that they have had to significantly ratchet back. Rent control is designed to strike a balance between protecting renters from unreasonable practices and not becoming an impediment to new housing. In its place, we've done a lot of work in this city over the last 4 years to advance renters' rights. As we face a nationwide affordable housing crisis, the last thing we need is less access to housing. Data has shown that rent control negatively impacts the maintenance or conversion of existing housing or the creation of new housing. Others have said this. My focus has always been on data-driven policymaking. I will not support a policy that's proven to worsen the very problems it's trying to solve, but things that we have done that I will continue to champion, and they've proven to be effective, are things like our Affordable Housing Trust Fund, our inclusionary zoning policy, the single-room occupancy ordinance that makes a very affordable housing, stable homes, stable schools, and the 4D Affordable Housing Incentive Program. We've also supported things like the Guaranteed Basic Income Pilot, additional rent subsidies, and this coming year, there's been a significant proposed increase to the MPHA contributions. That's going to increase the quality of our public housing.
Thank you all for speaking on a complex issue. The next question is on neighborhood support and welfare, and we will begin with Mr. Carney. I want you to think about this example, and then the question follows. Think about the East Phillips Urban Farm, the Roof Depot site that resides in a green zone as designated by the City of Minneapolis. The residents of the city's north and south green zones have experienced historic racial, political, environmental, and economic marginalization. In 2023, after almost a decade of stalemate and escalating costs, the state legislature acted to help deliver the Roof Depot building back to the community so it can realize the vision of an East Phillips urban farm. That's the example. In the future, how should the city approach community-led efforts to sustainably build wealth and provide pathways for better outcomes, specifically in disadvantaged socioeconomic areas? Mr. Carney.
I think the operative word, again, is area. We have this fixation on the idea that low-income people need to be concentrated in urban cores. I totally reject this concept. I think that we need to think about how we can build more affordable housing along the road town model in ex-urban locations, and how we can link to the core cities with transit like regular bus service. And I want to emphasize, we need to have Republicans participating in this process. I've had about 30 or 40 articles published by the Star Trib. I am a leading voice for moderate and liberal Republicans in Minnesota. And this puts me in a unique position to be able to work with the Republicans at the state legislature to innovate solutions that will work in a bipartisan way and that will address our issues in a metropolitan context rather than in the context of attempting to continue to concentrate a farm in an area where the economics of land use says, don't build a farm here. We need to think more metropolitan and in a broader perspective with working together with everyone in the state.
Thank you. Ms. Palmisano. Oh, excuse me, Mr. Metzger.
Listen to black people. Listen to indigenous people. Linden Hills, where I live, has some of the cleanest air in the city. Phillips has the dirtiest air in the city. They said, I want my air to be like yours. Some of our representation said, you don't deserve that. Why? Our representation that said that doesn't even live over there. They live by me where the cleanest air in the city is. Just like the United States Department of Justice consent decree, black people, indigenous people, poor people have been telling us what the United States feds had to come and tell us. No, just listen. That being said, or go down there. Just go down to the Phillips area. Here's a question. Do you want arsenic in Linden Hills? Anybody can answer. Or Fulton, or Armitage, or Kenny, or Lyndhurst, or East Harriet. Do you want arsenic in the playgrounds next to where your kids play, or your grandchildren? No? No? You guys seem maybe? Nobody wants that. Listen to community. I don't live in Armitage. I'm not going to tell Armitage what they want. Armitage community knows what they want. People that are represented are supposed to listen. I worked in the legislature as a policy aide, working in different communities. I have experience listening to people's ideas and turning them into actual laws that help people. All you have to do is listen.
Thank you. Ms. Palmisano.
Thank you. We need integration of affordability, affordable living, jobs programs in every neighborhood in Minneapolis. Concentrated areas of poverty are historically predictable, but they're not okay. It's extremely important in some of the recent programs that we've put in place, whether it's stable homes, stable schools, the single room occupancy allowance for zoning policy, that we are working to right these wrongs, and it's going to take a while. It's not something that's going to be able to happen overnight. Neighborhood organizations, and actually a community group here locally, have done a lot of hard work to do important truth-telling on redlining of things that have kept people out of the 13th Ward historically, and that is important to right those wrongs if to show our values as a city, if to show our values as a neighborhood. I know in the Armitage neighborhood there's been a lot of activity and effort that way. In our city, from the city council perspective, we have green zones where we give increased opportunity, increased tax incentives to do green business there, to create jobs there that are not going to bring pollution to a certain part of town. It's also important that we work to remediate the lands like the arsenic in the East Phillips neighborhood, and that has been one of the driving forces of my work on that project.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen.
So on this topic, it really doesn't matter what part of council politics you are representing, whether a more moderate side of council like myself or more to the left side of council, because wrong is wrong. And it really hurt my heart to learn that our representative on city council took a vote to tear down the roof depot, which is what a historically traumatized community said, please do not do that. And it led to those kinds of headlines that embarrass me about Minneapolis. We see that also in rent control, where we have taken votes that disengage or disenfranchise members of council while they are practicing their religion. This is a distressing thing for me. And Bob, I'm going to need your microphone.
You can use my mic, Kate.
Yeah, add 10 seconds to the clock, please. This is extremely distressing to me. And here's the thing, you can know all the details about something, all the acronyms and all the funds, all the names, and that doesn't equal getting results and bringing people together and working across differences and accomplishing things for our city.
Thank you. The next question remains in the neighborhood support and welfare area, and we will begin with Mr. Metzger. Do you see the neighborhood associations and councils benefiting your ward? Why or why not? How would you address neighborhood association funding? Please include in your answer your position on the City Council adjusting neighborhood funding to better address equity challenges and now requires the 70 neighborhood organizations to meet certain diversity standards or risk losing city funding. Mr. Metzger.
Equity, diversity, inclusion, these are words that everybody loved in 2020, but stopped using over a little while, and the actions were never there. So I think it's critically important to have a more diverse group, wherever that is, whether that's a neighborhood council, whether that's your job, Fortune 500 company, whatever it may be. I think it's critically important. Also, neighborhood organizations should get more funding. After this year, I believe it's going to go down to $10,000 a year for neighborhood organizations. I know Linden Hills neighborhood organization has to pay the chair of the board, not an elected position, $35,000 a year. But you make $10,000 a year. These neighborhood organizations do so much to enrich the lives and create a higher quality of life for neighbors. Now, imagine how critically important that is in an impoverished neighborhood where there are less access to resources, less opportunities, less investment historically high levels of discrimination. How important is it there where kids, if they don't have opportunities, they go to opportunities of crime? Invest in these neighborhoods. Enrich your cities so that you don't have to keep talking about public safety and you can be preventative. Invest in the communities.
Thank you. Ms. Palmisano.
It's important to have a citywide network of neighborhood organizations that work hard to represent and be reflective of their communities. or we lose that level of community. While it's true that decreasing neighborhood funding, neighborhood minimum funding, might impact our parts of our city in one way, it might completely wipe out the ability for other neighborhoods to even exist. I'm one of 3 of us up here, actually, that served on a neighborhood organization. My very first public service position was being on the Linden Hills Neighborhood Council. And then that day, being a naive volunteer, I ended up as the chair. There's great value in their work. I recognize the need to fund neighborhoods in a more equitable manner. We've done a lot here in Southwest Minneapolis neighborhood composition to increase the numbers of renters on our boards and the numbers of people of color on our boards. One of my top budget priority requests of Mayor Fry this year was an increase in the base funding to all neighborhood groups. The mayor's budget does include an increase of $5,000 to base funding, so from $10,000 to $15,000. And that's a start, but it's still not enough. I will continue to pursue other options, and some of our neighborhood organizations are very well organized and have, but whether by budget amendment or program modification, I think we need to increase the base funding to the point where all neighborhood organizations can have a certain amount of staff support and thrive.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen.
In 2015, I want to say, the incumbent began asking questions about neighborhood associations from the perspective of being on the audit committee. And those questions weren't only about the finances of neighborhood associations, but their purpose. And that has led to a really, really long, bureaucratic, process-driven exploration that has resulted in taking down base funding to the point where you can't even pay for all the things you're required to do to stay compliant as a 501c3 corporation. I would fully fund neighborhood associations with the equitable formula. You don't have to go to the last minute in the budget session with me, because we'll find that $3 million, and we will say that this is the glue that holds our communities together. And further, I will not be recommending that we have a rate card of additional bureaucratic things that neighborhood associations could perform in order to earn the funds to be a neighborhood association that is trying to strengthen community. So I would like us to get it together on this one and quickly. We shouldn't be spending years and so much time to say that this is extremely important. And it's a pride of our country that our neighborhood associations are so strong. And we don't need to take staffing in the neighborhood association group down from 36 to 20 and slash their budget while we triple the budget of the audit committee.
Thank you. Mr. Carney.
I've enjoyed listening to everybody so far, and in this context of my plan to not take the oath, one of the purposes of doing that is that I would be offering new ideas, and again, trying to link the Republicans statewide in with working together to improve Minneapolis. And in that context, I would look forward to weekly meetings with everybody on this panel to make sure that everybody is heard. I see that as a major role. We'll get to the neighborhood association in a minute. Wanted to make one other comment on the environment. When you look at the design of Minneapolis, and it is a design city, this was planned out by the park board way back to have a Mississippi River that is pristine. It is not something you're going to find anywhere else in the country. And in terms of air quality, this is a real blessing that we've had in Minneapolis. Regarding neighborhood associations, I think the real driving force a couple decades ago was getting more funding for housing, and that has declined as a need. It's being addressed in other ways. I think we ought to look at the role of possibly having neighborhood associations work together with the police so that we can have more coordination of neighborhood associations and the police department. I think that will be a great role for neighborhood associations going forward.
Thank you. We'll move on to a question on climate and environmental equity. And we are back to beginning with Ms. Palmisano. Minneapolis's current funding for equitable climate action in the city is about $2 to $3 million annually, coming from what's called the franchise fee. Xcel and CenterPoint utility customers in Minneapolis pay this fee as a percentage of total utility bills. What scale of dedicated funding do you, as a city council member, believe is needed to meet Minneapolis's climate goals in an equitable way, and what should the source of the funding be?
There's a lot in there. Residents of urban areas need healthy living environments, and we all, as Americans, need to do better for the future and for our climate future. To that end, I was a proud supporter of our new climate equity plan. In fact, our summer ward forum was upstairs, and it was about that Minneapolis climate equity plan, how we would do better over these next 20 years and how we would get there as a city. That's going to take funding that we put forward in a dedicated way as a city, but it's also going to take human behavioral inspiration to change from all of us here in this room. One of those metrics, I'll just say, is to have 60% decreased trips by single occupancy vehicles, I think, and that's going to take effort from all of us. I am the co-author of an ordinance amendment that would increase the utility franchise fees $10 million a year, so that would multiply that initial investment in climate equity. I had a meeting this afternoon about how we would apportion those funds, and I'll say the tip of the spear there in terms of how we lead with that, with so much grant money available at the federal level and the state level, is about staffing. How do we staff up in this environment where the unemployment rate is so low? We will use home weatherization techniques, focusing on those green zones. We will be planting more trees, and I'll stop there.
And I neglected to mention that the climate questions come from the organization Community Power. Ms. Mortensen.
I had a couple of meetings early on in this process with the People's Climate Equity Group. I was super impressed with the way that they did their organizing. They were thoughtful. They are different and unique by each ward of the city. It is people-driven. It is equitably considered. And I very early on said, let's do it. You had me at hello. I don't know why people have to crawl around on their knees to get good and important work funded and supported. It should not be that hard. I also feel that, from our representative, we had rather tepid support for the People's Climate and Equity Plan. And I knew that to be the case because when I saw it get voted in and saw how much excitement there was from the other 12 folks on council, I felt like, golly, why weren't we feeling that sense of assurance in our leaders' support for this very important plan? Further, I am excited to get in there and talk to the biggest climate emitters about being part of the solution. What an awesome corporate social responsibility opportunity do we have for them? It's a matter of framing things up in the right way. We need to be on the right side of these things. It's not a matter of whether or not you are a practical progressive, more moderate side, or more left side. Certain things are just the right things to do. So you can count on that from me. And then also, when it comes to taking fewer trips by car, I like that idea, but don't socially engineer it into Bryant Avenue because you're going to end up driving people absolutely nuts because we're paying for projects that we didn't ask for.
Thank you. Mr. Carney.
This is why you need an idea guy like me. We are now going to solve global warming in 1 minute. There is this place in Scott, I'm a physics guy from McAllister. There is a place in space called Lagrange Point 1 between the Earth and the Sun. It's 1 million miles from Earth, 92 million miles from the Sun. You put something there orbiting the Sun. It stays between the Sun and the Earth, doesn't follow the Sun, doesn't follow the Earth. We need to put pairs of tethered giant mirrors there, thousands of them, maybe millions. The first mirror targets sunlight to the second mirror. The second mirror redirects that sunlight to existing solar panel farms. That's how you pay for the system. Forget $50 trillion Green New Deals. This is a system that pays for itself. But you got two mirrors. One of them has a backside that is blocking sunlight. That causes global cooling. So this is both a solution to global warming. It is also a way to produce all the solar electricity that we need. We burn $6 trillion a year in fossil fuels. So this is why you need an idea guy like me, who is an elected Republican from Minneapolis, working with Lene, who's going to keep doing the city council job. Well, I'm going to start shaking some lapels in the Republican Party and sobering them up.
Thank you. Mr. Metzger.
Lonnie, the question, please.
From Community Power, Minneapolis's current funding is about $2 to $3 million from the franchise fee. What scale of dedicated funding do you believe is needed to meet Minneapolis's climate goals, and what should be the source of the funding?
I don't think anybody yet has answered what the source of the funding should be. I think everybody has skipped over that part. Also, Bob has been working with Elon Musk lately. It's been great work.
Who's he?
I grew up pretty close to George Floyd Square. I have a family member that was a Black Panther. I started off just in activism, becoming a community organizer. No problem, though, is as big as the climate crisis. If we don't invest in the earth, which is the only one we have, if you guys weren't aware, we will have no other problems to try to figure out and solve, because when I'm the age of maybe the median age in the room, it's going to be too hot, right? When we look at where we're getting funding from, over the last 2 years, the police budget went up $36 million, but we have 300 less police today than we did in 2020. So when we're asking where the money's coming from, it's available. We don't have to ask where the money's coming from. When property taxes in Southwest Minneapolis are the highest in the city, increasingly because we have some of the highest police misconduct, Justine Demond, $20 million, George Floyd, $27 million. When we have that coming directly from you and you and you and you's property taxes, we know where we can get money from. We've done property tax levies for police, but we haven't done it for the climate.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to a more holistic city government question, and we will begin with Ms. Mortensen. As a city council member, you are responsible to both your ward specifically and the city as a whole. How will you manage this, especially when there are competing priorities, and how do you handle conflicts of interest in that area?
Extremely helpful has been the hundreds of conversations that I've had with you at your door to understand that the things that we are really needing now are the things that everybody in our city is really needing now, beginning with personal safety, which of course is safety from harassment as well as safety from crime. Personal safety. Number two, when our city services are not serving us, it might be annoying for us. It's a devastation for other parts of our city where renters are the majority. So when you have 9 weeks of emergency one-sided parking because you have failed at a core service like snow removal, and you're looking for parking in the dark of night with only half of it available in some rental neighborhood of the city, and you get a ticket and you get towed, while the city is paying an extra $1 million for more towing to tow you for getting stuck in the snow they couldn't clear, that's just not right.
Hello.
So we have to do better as a city to understand the consequences of our actions and the decisions that we're making. And a key difference here is I understand that I am from the state of Ward 13, and I have fallen in love with our neighborhoods and our people in these last number of months. And I cannot wait to help you feel like you are being heard. You are part of this process. Bryant Avenue 2, there will be no Bryant Avenue 2 with me. I will be there with you. I will not forget that I work for you. When public safety is saying there's nothing more you can do, I will be there for you.
Thank you. Mr. Carney.
Bryant and 46th Street is the road to nowhere. It's just amazing. In terms of the 13th Ward and relating it to the rest of the city and also to the state, the 13th Ward has really been unique for a long time. And actually, if you look at the physical design of the city council, it's very unusual. You have a row of city council seats from 1 to 12, and then it takes a 90-degree turn, and now you got 13th Ward sitting there. So the 13th Ward council member, it actually is speaking to the entire council. Everybody else is on a panel. I'm just really struck by that as a design. And historically, this neighborhood has been a very important neighborhood both in state politics and also in city politics. If you take a look at earlier drawings of the state legislative districts, this has always been a dominant area. Harold Anderson represented this area in the legislature. He was the chair of the tax committee and the judiciary committee. Did one in the morning and did in the afternoon. And again, in terms of trying to link the Republicans statewide, I think this is another dimension of that. It's not a question of just the ward working together with the city. It's the city working together with the state. And we need a Republican voice elected in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Mr. Metzger. The question. Oh, the question. As a city council member, you are responsible to both your ward, specifically in the city as a whole. How do you manage competing priorities and conflicts of interest?
Yes. Amazing question. So when we look at the differences, like Bob was saying here, between Ward 13 and the rest of the city, it can be things like, I want a bike path and I don't want a bus here versus I don't want arsenic. So here's an example. Last night I was actually at a protest for what's happening in Stillwater Prison. And there were inmates that had been in there for 18 years that had been experiencing this. Simultaneously, I was on a Zoom call with Linden Hills Neighborhood Board where they were talking about the investment they needed for monkey bars. I'm currently doing it right now. Like I said in my introductory statement, this is not a job for me. I feel like this is what I'm called to do. We have to stand up for a bigger purpose and also listen to the people that are our neighbors that want things. I live on Chowan, and just a couple blocks up, there are some new developments. When you compare somebody living in Linden Hills with a $700,000 house, and they have now a $1.5 million house across, to somebody that doesn't have water, it's vastly different, but both of them are real problems. And it is the city council members' job to listen, be transparent, give the people in the ward what they want. Now that we have a strong mayor, our job is slightly limited, but we can give constituents what they want. That is our job, and address the greater city as a whole.
Thank you. Another kind of holistic question,
Excuse
and
me.
we will be.
Excuse me. I
Oh,
think I'm
I'm
the last
sorry, Ms.
speaker on that.
Palmisano.
That's all right.
Oh, and
There's a lot of directions that this question has kind of taken and gone. I think we could, instead of trying to reinvent it, I do want to point out a discrepancy. We don't actually sit in order of wards on the dais. It's true. Last term, I sat around the corner there. It's a nice seat. You can see the looks on all of your colleagues' faces during the meeting. And you don't have to be in the spotlight. It's not my strong suit. But this term as council vice president, I sit square in the middle of that dais. But, we talk about the consequences of our actions, and one of the things mentioned at the very beginning of this forum is that the 13th ward is the votingest ward in the whole city. Often when we talk about city politics, that means that the 13th ward has, a bigger voice in city-wide races, perhaps, because of the number of votes that come from this ward. Some people in the past have called it the Fertile Crescent. It goes kind of, this crescent around the city that includes wards 7 and 12, all the way down to 12. But, An important step that we've taken to really understand the consequences of our actions at City Council in a broader lens is our race equity impact statement that is a part of every single council action, yes, even non-controversial ones. That race equity impact statement is about taking a look through a race equity lens of every decision we make, even things that don't seem like would have anything to do with race equity. Something I have been using our audit team for is how we do better in ways of equity in terms of assessments. And now I'm told to stop. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen?
Oh, go twice. Go twice.
Yeah, I have more to say.
Oh, no.
Let's put more time on the clock.
I'm sorry.
Should have gave
That's
that to me,
okay.
Lonnie.
Too many rounds, and I'm losing the grid that I created has flopped.
Can I make up my own question?
No. No. Good try, though. Oh, we're going to stay in the land of more holistic questions. And we will begin with Mr. Metzger. What do you think are the most,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Carney? Yeah, you got me. I don't know what my problem is. Takes a village, yes, and Ward 13's obviously a very great village. All right, Mr. Carney, what do you think are the most important challenges faced by Minneapolis and why? What would you do to address those challenges and remain accountable for the programs put in place? How will you measure if you accomplish your goals?
Lene, what are you going to do? Seriously, I think one of the biggest challenges that we face in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and nationally is a crisis of public behavior. There's a huge problem here. I am currently working as a public school sub-teacher in Minneapolis Public Schools and in Okehennepin. And for decades, we have had essentially a doctrine that we're not going to enforce public behavior. I mean, I've experienced this. It's bad enough being a sub. I've seen, what a lot of regular teachers go through. And I'm actually looking at some really radical solutions. One of them is straitjackets. I am developing a design for a combination of a tuxedo and a straitjacket. And the point is that we need to figure out how to control unacceptable public behavior. You'll be hearing more about this. But we really do need to do something. I think we have a public behavior crisis in this country. Donald Trump is one example, but not the only one.
Thank you. I'll repeat the question because I'm not sure that answer went anywhere near it.
I'm sure it didn't.
What do you think are the most important challenges faced by Minneapolis? What do you do to address them and remain accountable? Mr. Metzger.
Thank you for the question, Lonnie. One of the biggest challenges we face as a city, I would say, as a world, is definitely people being safe, public safety. No matter where you go in the world, people want to be safe. Additionally, people need to have access to stable, secure, safe, and dignified housing. That being said, how do we measure, you said correctly, how do we measure if our goals are being met? What we don't do is just hold on to arbitrary ideas because this is what we wanted to work. We have to be open-minded to pivoting and potentially changing. We also have to realize it's not what I want, or definitely not what Bob wants. And we have to say, is this serving the people? That's always the end goal. When I was a legislative aide, you can look at the lifeline, essentially, of a bill. You can see where it essentially died, which usually it goes to the Senate to die. But you can see what happened with it, and then you make adjustments. You change based on what happened. We have to be open-minded to pivoting and changing direction. I think public safety in Minneapolis is definitely the biggest challenge. Public safety looks drastically different depending on what area of the city you are in. One of my competitors wanted to do a police buyback, which is absolutely abhorrent if you do the day. I don't have time to talk about it, but if you research it, your mind will be blown. Public safety, access to affordable housing, and being open-minded to changing directions so that we service the people.
Thank you. Ms. Palmisano.
Thank you. What are our most important challenges, and what do we do to address and measure them? I will say one of the biggest statements that we made as a city is to declare racism a public health crisis in our city, and seeing the intersection of some of those most difficult issues that we look to address at the local government level, how we see the intersectionality of policing, of just and fair policing with things like public safety, with things like housing and people's access to housing. All of these things intersect. I ran out of time last time. I was speaking about how we have a race equity impact analysis for every single council action that we take and how important and serious that is. You know, I think that's important to implement in everything we do. Right now, I have the benefit of serving on a council with a majority-minority council. It is important to listen to my colleagues. It is important to hear where they're coming from, to lift up and support the work that they are trying to do in their communities. And I do that in every way that I can from my perspective and through my lens. I look at how to support other parts of our city. I'm on your side. Audit has actually been the measurement. It's been criticized a lot in this meeting, but audit has actually been a way for us to measure and make clear recommendations and then work to remediate issues on some very sensitive topics.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen.
The biggest issue. Oh, thank you. You sure you don't want to work with me? We could get a lot done. Let's talk. Yeah. The biggest issue we're facing in the city right now is a failure of leadership. A lot of people would have you think that the issue that we're facing is a pull to the left, but we're missing a key question there. Why is that happening in the first place? Hello. Perhaps it's happening because we are failing to keep our community safe. Perhaps it is happening because people in all parts of the city suffer when their cars break in potholes, or they can't even move around the city because the snow hasn't been taken care of. These basic core functions of the city, when they fail, it is a misery, especially in communities that don't have the resources that we have in Ward 13. That is why I am so excited to advocate for the things that are important to us, because they are important to everybody across the city. And by the way, we need to show up more thoughtfully in our social agenda. Because we may say we're all about equity, but when we're taking votes that just needlessly poke at others, then we are not in a good place. And for my colleague over here to the right, I do just want to say that I would never buy extra policing. I think that is horrible. If police, once they've finished all their work and their overtime, want to spend some extra time in our community where we appreciate what they do, then I think that would be just fine.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that?
No.
Don't worry, neither can I.
You can respond later. Move to a demographic question, and we will start, I think, appropriately with Mr. Metzger. People under 35 make up 55% of the city's population. What do you see as the role of young people in decisions that impact our city and community?
The role of young people is to bring in new ideas, new energy, things that are with the times. Let's look at a bigger scale. We probably in this room do not agree with him, but Mitch McConnell, you guys saw what happened to him, right? He had essentially 2 strokes while he was trying to deliver a speech. I don't agree with Mitch McConnell, but I pray that he is all right, and it's almost elder abuse that he's out here being paraded around. Literally. People under 35 know how to use TikTok. Mitch McConnell doesn't know even how to log into Facebook. There are certain ideas that older generations are not going to align with and to move forward, and that's okay. We need to be able to transcend. We need to be not in an old political paradigm of fighting, but have a holistic agenda where we come together, we have ideas that align with what the people want. I mean, everybody in here was 35 one time. Everybody in here was 20 one time. You have a different direction when you're 30 than when you are 70 or whatever the case may be. I don't know, that's kind of ageist, but I love Bernie Sanders. He's 79, but you know, the barriers to get into politics are so extremely high, it's disruptive that I'm even sitting here right now. So everybody deserves a seat, no matter what the age is.
Thank you.
Except Mitch McConnell.
Sorry, Mitch.
I have never, in all of the forums that I have moderated, had such a steep difficulty of keeping a straight face. I apologize. Oh, Ms. Palmisano, take on the demographics.
Young people and what's their role. You know, some element of diversity that we do have that I see in block clubs, block parties that we run around to on National Night Out and other weekends across the years, that we have age diversity on every street in Southwest Minneapolis, and that's something that helps create a real safe environment and safe neighborhood. You have people in different parts of their lives doing different things at different times, and that really contributes to the fabric and one of the great things that it is to live around here. I'm the mother of 2 young people, so I see every way that I respond to my colleagues, every way that I conduct myself at a neighborhood meeting through that lens, as though I am in their presence. I've been part of our youth coordinating board and been presenting to Youth Congress. There's a very important tenet to the youth coordinating board, and it's no decision about us without us. And I think that as we look to make decisions, whether it's different communities in our city, which I spend a lot of time, not just here in the 13th Ward, but across our city, at community meetings across our city. You know, it is important to have the youth voice in the works that we do, and we do on some of our boards and commissions. We have perhaps the youngest city council I've ever seen. That's been an adjustment and also an opportunity. But that is where I get my energy on social justice issues, and always had, as I began as a coach at Southwest.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen.
See how well I work across differences to get things done?
We're still tabling that. It's okay.
Okay.
It's a mic that works.
I do. Yes, thank you. So experience does matter, and we have a very young council. The really key thing is, what is the experience that matters now? Because what we've had for 10 years is a manager moving the widgets back and forth, paying attention to a lot of detail, measuring, digging in, trying to get to the bottom of it. We never quite get to the bottom of it, though, and we never quite get to the result. And so what you will get with me is a leadership skill set, a skill that knows how to lay out a vision, bring people along, and drive for the results that matter. What you get with me is less us v them, because it's really just a distraction from delivering a mediocre result. And when we hold ourselves accountable to delivering what government should for all of its citizens, then we're going to have less of an us v them situation. And I have no problem standing up and saying no, but I will reset that table every single day, whatever it takes to continue to drive for the results that we all are looking for. We need to be proud of our city again. We need to restore dignity to service. And my son, who's 22, when I told him I was running for city council, and all of my 3 kids, 25 and 27, said, "Heck yeah, Mom. I might not agree with your politics, but I think you'll do a good job." And that's a key thing. On my cabinet, I've got someone to the right, I've got someone to the left, I've got younger people, raise your hands back there. And the key thing is that when we come together for the greater good, boy, do we shine.
Thank you. Mr. Carney?
You know, I'm looking around here, and I think, you know, we really ought to think about raising the voting age to 65. But we'll leave that for right now. So, you know, as a sub-teacher, I work with a lot of young kids, and it is absolutely fascinating to listen to your average third grader, fifth grader, how open-minded they are, how smart they are, how many great ideas they have. It is a real energizer and inspiration to me to do that. And I want to go back to the straitjacket thing. I'm not going to let go of that either. We do have a behavioral problem, but one of the things that I'm thinking about is what can we do? You know, the straitjacket was originally developed as a more humane way of taking care of people to prevent them from being injured. We have kids in our classes that are disrupting them. Well, let's take a look at technology and what we can do about that. We can have earbuds, microphones, and channels where a teacher and the students that want to listen to that teacher can tune in and can tune out students who are being disruptive, who are sitting in the back with a straitjacket if necessary, and that they're still in the class. We need to open our minds and start thinking about what we can do about what I do think is a serious public behavior crisis. That's something we need to address going forward.
Thank you. I'm looking at the clock. We have time for about one more question plus closing statements. So I'm going to move on to current events. And we will begin with Ms. Palmisano. Given the most recent court ruling by the district court against the 2040 plan, what would be your position on the next steps? So the question is basically, where does the city go with the move against the 2040 plan?
Thank you. I still believe now, as I did back then, that we had the right goals, but we had the wrong plan. As many people in this room will remember, I was the lone no vote against the 2040 plan. It was because I didn't think that a one-size-fits-all approach met the needs of our city, met the needs of different parts of our city. And I didn't think it would help us build more affordable housing more quickly here. I think those results have panned out. The recent courts have ruled that we will need to take a step back, and I think that the way that we will look to solve it, I don't know, I haven't consulted with the city attorneys on this topic today, and it just came out, but I believe we'll need to do that environmental review, and I believe we'll need to make some significant adjustments to that plan. You can count on me to follow through. Even when I was that lone no vote, I enthusiastically made changes to that Minneapolis 2040 plan that would better reflect the years of community engagement that was happening around it. The meetings in a box that started at the neighborhood organization level, to the forums, to the listening sessions that were had, to the feedback that came in droves. I think we can do better. I think that the goals are still the right goals for our city. I think we got caught up in some of the zoning pieces of it.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen?
Okay, this is where the difference between management and leadership is going to really shine for Ward 13. Recognizing that this reset of 2040 plan is a huge opportunity for us to understand as a ward what are the things that we do not like from that plan and get organized so those things are not going to be happening upon us, and what are the things that we celebrate in that plan. So whether it's the Transportation Action Plan, whether it's Vision Zero, or other road projects coming your way, to redesign the purpose of roads to the point where we don't feel that we can age in place, for example, whether, whatever the climate pieces are, that we can adjust to really support that we get a four-season plan for taking care of our roads, keeping them free of garbage, potholes, and snow, so we can move around the city, so that we can have the local businesses that we rely on be vibrant in our community, so that we can have downtown 2.0 off the blocks and ready to go, and a resurgence for uptown. In this reset, there's an opportunity through zoning, through other changes for us to reframe in the way that works for us best and make those adjustments to something that will benefit the entire city.
Thank you. Mr. Carney.
Again, I'm really grateful to everybody who's participating in this discussion. I think that it's a real indication that we have a lot of very thoughtful people here. I have quite a bit of confidence in Lene as to how she's going to be handling this. One comment I want to make about the 2040 plan, I really like the idea that, that the triplex was made available citywide, and it kind of mystifies me why there are not a lot more remodeling projects going on of existing housing, because it seems to me if you have 3 housing units, that's what you have with a triplex, that we ought to be able to address our housing affordability a lot better if we can take a look at how properties can be more effectively converted from single family to duplex or triplex. So that's something we really need to work on. Bryan Avenue and streets in general, I do make a brief comment about that. I do have a plan for what I call steel super streets. And what I'm talking about is essentially something like a railroad track that is inverted. It has a 2 or 3 foot wide flange on the top that is steel. I am serious about doing something about potholes. And if we have this, we can have public transit that is moving on that kind of a right-of-way, and you're going to have such a much more pleasant ride for both private drivers and transit. We need to take a look at that, and I'll be rolling this plan out too.
Thank you. Mr. Metzger.
All right, you don't need to repeat this question. 2040 plan and the implications of it are actually far too serious to make a joke about on this one, especially considering your last statement about cutting a building up into thirds, which literally screws single families, which is why so many people, Ward 13 people, I can't believe that me and Lene agree on something, but we do. It may be for different reasons, but clearly, like you stated, we've forgotten the goal here. We're looking at equity and sustainability, but when you look at the most dense cities in America, they're also the most expensive. Density does not equal affordability. Additionally, they're not making affordable houses when they make cheap developments that cost the person in the affordable house $500 a month to heat because it's built with cheap materials. Our council knew that there lacked safeguards in the 2040 plan, which is why Lene was the only one to vote no against it. But safeguards aren't a buzzword. They're not sexy. It's not cool to say, oh, I didn't vote for this thing that could be good because of no safeguards. They basically used people of color to make policies that would only help developers. When you talk about this, cutting up families, cutting up single family homes, who are the most at-risk people? Single people or families? It's families that need single-family homes. When you take a 2,000 square foot unit, a house, and you cut it up into 3, that turns out into 600 square feet. So we're jamming people in, and it allows developers to crank up prices. The 2040 plan, even if done properly, is still on the backs of BIPOC people to make developers money that are absentee developers, not even local landlords.
Thank you. Candidates each get 1 minute for a final closing statement, and we will go back to the same order as opening statements and begin with Ms. Palmisano.
You know me. You know I listen, and I am all in. I'm a neighbor, a wife, a friend, and a mother. I've also been a consistent, level-headed, yes, calm and direct, advocate for my constituents for 10 years of service, where I'm at City Hall and in community for you every day. My kids have grown up in neighborhood meetings and community gatherings across the city. You want your council member at the leadership table like I have done. In this way, you have a voice in everything. You don't get to cheerlead your way to change. I believe in honest, transparent governing. I believe in fair and just policing. I want us to be the best city in the nation. I want our roads and our plowing to improve. I work hard to ensure basic government functions happen efficiently and effectively. Even when my work isn't in the headlines, I deliver for the people of our city. These are difficult times. My work here is not done. I love this job, and I ask your vote so I can continue standing up for you.
Thank you. Ms. Mortensen?
Hey, who knew I was a cheerleader? I actually was. But here's the thing. I'm also trained as a journalist. I also served my country in the United States Peace Corps. I've also spent time in the classroom as a teacher. I've lived in the United States and I've lived abroad. I have been in Minneapolis for a total of over 20 years. I love it here. And I have experience that is deep in what it is like to be in different parts of the world, in different parts of the country. I have been myself a struggling student. I know I have a ton of privilege. And there are a lot of things that I could do with my time. For me, this is about change, because I don't believe that we cannot do better as a city. So if we want to have more of the same, if we don't believe it's going to be any better, let's vote for more of the same, absolutely. And if not, please, believe in a better city, vote for me. I am reliable to our values, our political values. I will help us make our yard signs true. Take an opportunity to meet Kate. These high-stakes moments aren't the right time, perhaps. Come to a Meet Kate. Get to know.
Thank you. Mr. Kearney?
Thank you. I'm running to help the Republican Party. We need two parties in Minnesota and nationally. And we need a Republican Party, not the one we've got now. I've been publishing since 2009. My first article was on the city audit. We only had one person working on the city audit at that time. It was a horrible situation. So I'm asking you to elect me as an elected Republican leader and voice in Minneapolis. And, as I've said, I will not take the oath. Now, that is a liberating thing. It means that I will be able to work with everybody in meetings, have better communication, and having good working relationships with everybody, and Lene can continue to serve as a de facto council member. To me, this makes a lot of sense. I hope it makes sense to you, and I'm asking for your vote. First choice, please vote for others' second and third choice. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Metzger?
Thank you guys all for coming out here tonight. I hope you also enjoyed the state fair and did indeed get the fried pickles, which I did. Hope you did that, and the mini donuts. I am a fourth-generation resident of Ward 13, but up until 1968, I wouldn't have even been able to live in my grandpa's home on 52nd and Ewing because of the racially restrictive covenants. This is not what I wrote down. That just came to me. Since 2020, after the killing of George Floyd and the pandemic, Minneapolis has not come up with a concrete plan on how to move the city forward. We have even hired somebody that we paid $350,000 for, and they didn't do anything and left a year later. We've spent $150 million in police misconduct and PTSD claims, and the city is not moving in the direction that the people want. While door knocking, I've literally been told you don't belong here. I'm disappointed because I really like you, but you just can't run in Ward 13. I'm here to be new leadership, bring a bold new vision that actually is transparent, doesn't just say it, actually has pragmatic vision, and is the first BIPOC city council member of Ward 13. I appreciate you guys for your time.
First of all, on a personal level, thank you to the village who managed to keep the moderator on track.
For the moderator!
On behalf of the Minneapolis League of Women Voters and our co-sponsors, I want to thank the audience for coming tonight and the internet audience for viewing. We especially thank our candidates for being part of the democratic process by running for office and being willing to serve our community. Many thanks. Many thanks to MCN6 for recording this forum and Mount Olivet Church for providing space. The studio and video recording of this forum and all other City Council forums will be available unedited for viewing on the League of Women Voters Minneapolis website, lwvmpls.org. Recordings may not be edited or used by candidates or the public for political purposes. The League also researches issues important to our members and the health of our communities. If you're interested in finding out more about what the League does and how you can make a difference, please visit our website, lwvmpls.org, and consider joining as a member. And I'll note, it's not the League of Women Voters, that's the name, but men are more than welcome and have served as national officers. So consider joining us as a member or a volunteer. You can find more nonpartisan information about candidates and about voting at another League website, vote411.org. Information on voting and registering to vote can also be found on the Minnesota Secretary of State website, mnvotes.gov. Remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 7th. Early voting starts September 22nd. Remember to think about your ranked choices. Please vote. Every single voice matters. Thank you.